Okay, so the belt sander at Caister Grammar School. When you come to the belt sander, you need to make sure that you've got your hair tied back, you need to make sure you've got your apron on, and you need to make sure you've got some goggles available from the goggle racks in the classroom. Also make sure that you are sanding something in the right way, as in you may have to have it checked by your teacher, that you understand the process you're going to be doing. You should have had the process explained, or you should understand what you need to do. There's some key safety things about working with a belt sander that you need to know. Here's my piece of timber that I'm going to sand today. I've got my apron on, I've got my goggles on, and I am ready to go. So, key things. This is the belt sander in T4. We have two belt sanders, one in each of our classrooms. The belt sander in T3 is slightly different. Make sure you look and see how the machine is turned on and off. Most importantly, that you know how to turn it off before you even start the machine. This machine actually has two ways to turn it off. One is this emergency stop that's here. It's in a rather strange position on this machine. And two, down there, we've got a stop button which you press with your knee, okay? This machine has automatic extraction in the machine. So while working with the machine, when you turn it on, the extraction automatically comes on and begins to extract the dust that you're going to create from sanding your piece of timber. On the wall in the opposite classroom in T3, there is a big red button and green button that says extractor. You must turn that on when you're using the belt sander. Make sure you turn on the extraction before you use it. So, with this machine, if you come to the machine and someone has used the emergency stop, when you've come to it and press the green button, it's more than likely that nothing's going to happen, okay? Make sure that you just give that little round button a small twist to the right, and it will unlock the sander and make the sander able to be used. You might also find that it's still not working. Perhaps the isolator on the wall has been turned off if the technician has been servicing the machine or working on the machine at all. If that's the case, and the teacher will have already turned the power onto your classroom, please make sure you just ask the teacher if is it okay to use the belt sander, as it may have been isolated for a reason. So when we get to this, you're going to turn the isolator on the wall. It should be in the on position already checked by your teacher before the lesson. The green button is going to be go, because we've already unlocked our emergency stop. As you can see with the belt sander always travels downwards. I've opened the guard really nice and wide here for the moment so you can see that, but the belt is always travelling down towards the bed on the machine. The bed on the machine in this case has a sliding piece of timber attached to it. Sometimes that's a useful piece of equipment, sometimes it's not necessary to be used and can be put to one side. While working on this machine, you should always have your piece of timber on the bed of the machine. You should never be introducing a product to the belt above the bed of the machine, okay? So when working with that, it should always be flat on the bed before it's introduced to the piece of timber, to the belt sander. Working with this as well, the guard can be lowered, so you should only really have around 10 to 15 millimeters above the piece of timber showing, so that you can't possibly sand your fingers or hands while working. This also comes down to the importance of knowing the size of the piece of timber really matters. While working with something, you should be able to hold it with both hands and be able to sand it on the belt. If you're working with the slide, you can attach the piece of wood to the side of the slide and it will help you achieve a nice straight finish on your piece of timber, but that's not a given. You're still going to have to think and work appropriately on the machine to achieve that. With that, what I'm saying is we have to think about the size of the piece of timber, because if we try to sand something which is too small, it is a danger to ourselves. Take this piece of timber here, for example. It's around 50 millimeters by 50 millimeters. That will be okay to sand along the side of the piece of timber. Any smaller than that would not be appropriate. There's examples of these on the windowsill by the belt sander, so you can check if your piece of material is too small. The other thing is thickness. This machine is not a thicknesser. We should not be trying to sand material thinner using this machine, because we have nothing to hold on to here. In this scenario, I'm literally just going to sand my fingertips. An injury is very, very possible. So you need to make sure that you're not trying to thickness pieces of timber. On this block here, I've got quite a large block here. I could sand the sides, all sides of this block quite happily, and have plenty of distance between myself and the belt. but something like that is completely inappropriate. Please make sure you check with your teacher if you think something you're about to sand is not right, to make sure you're doing it correctly. So I've got my machine, I'm set up, I've got my goggles on, I've got my apron on, I've got my hair tied back, and those who know me will find that funny. When you've got your block of timber, the last thing is when you're sanding your block of timber, you must always sand in the same direction as the wood grain. If you don't know what wood grain is, you can see the stripes in the timber here working across. So I must have that orientated so the belt sander sands straight down and in line with that grain. What you'll find if you don't do that is that you get lots of horrible marks running across your piece of timber, which you then have to sand off at a later date. It causes you more work and it isn't attractive on your timber there. Whereas this will line up the lines with the grain and actually disguise those markings. It can still be sanded later to make an even smoother finish, but it will actually make it look a lot nicer as a final piece. Okay, so with the machine, we can turn it on. Our work is going to be on the bed of the machine. We've got all our PPE equipment on, and we can introduce that into the belt. Using two hands, I can move that left to right, nice and gently, pushing it gently against the belt. I'm not pushing really firmly as hard as I can push against that belt, but I'm also not just tickling it on there because I'm going to be stood there for a very long time if I do that. It's a gentle amount of pressure and I can move it back and forth. The reason we're moving it back and forth is because the belt will generate heat because we've got friction at play here. The heat that's generated can potentially burn the timber and mark the timber, and that's not what we want on our final pieces of work. So we want them looking nice and smooth and nicely finished. So you're going to move it back and forth. The other key part there is I keep saying to put it on the bed and slide it into your piece of work. Okay, if you attempt to sand it higher than the bed or you attempt to put it on an angle like this, it can get jammed into the machine. It can catch and move your fingers towards the danger zone, and that is a really bad position to be in. Let's have a look at me just sanding one side of the machine. Look at your timber as well. When you've done a task, I can see that I was sanding this, my pressure wasn't quite even, and I've got some grain here that's still left, which has not been sanded. So if you would say, oh, well, I did the sanding task, it isn't appropriate really if you haven't completed it. So the easiest way to do that is to put even pressure on it, or just to flip it upside down, give it another quick sand, and you'll see that that'll disappear. There we go, one nice, neat, sanded piece of timber with a hole in, which I drilled in the pillar drill demonstration. So, with that then, we've got a nice piece of timber sanded there. We should know what we're doing with the belt sander. If you have anything more challenging or anything which you think is more than the obvious, or potentially a piece which you're a little bit unsure about the size on or the shape of, or whether it's appropriate to use the belt sander to do so, please make sure you discuss it with your teacher. But if you can come to the machine and understand what you've got to do and have a deeper understanding of the machine, I hope this video has supported you.